Hi everyone. I'm remote here for a couple of days in the Monashee, and yeah, the reoccurring event of the road going into this riparian area that we have a relationship with, and the bridge, temporary bridge is in, the big bridge, the final bridge is going in probably beginning of September, hard to know. But the scar is quite large for the road, and there's places where you can come out of the forest, and right now, right here, there's a cool breeze happening. You reach a certain point as you get close to the opening where the road is, and you get a wave of heat. And this is a major contributor to the warming of the climate and how humans are involved. We create these massive abiotic influences with parking lots and roads and openings, all kinds of developments that just are hard surfaces, and they absorb the heat and then they radiate that heat, and entire areas are warming, and it's actually playing a role when we do the research as to how the temperatures are changing, because a lot of the data gathering areas that have been collecting the temperatures over the years have gone from being kind of remote countryside locations where there's been relatively a lot of green space, say, or some green space, to being housing developments and industrial parks and all sorts of things. And the very nature of those types of locales being developed is changing the temperature where those data collection units are. So that's interesting, because if you pool all of that information together, we can actually make a real important link as to how humans are warming the planet. It's pavement, concrete, and so on. So, but here, so yeah, the road is going downstream from the bridge, and they're moving at a very rapid rate, and we're now seeing a little bit of daylight on near the tops of the trees in the riparian area, which is them taking the trees down and building the road. Now this riparian area, it's kind of in a ravine, and you could, in parts of it, it's a small canyon, and at most it's probably a quarter of a mile wide, and that's just not enough. I mean, riparian areas are not logged because they're protected by law. I've talked about this before, and that protection allows old growth and native habitat to flourish. But it's not enough, particularly when there is a natural change in the environment. For example, this stream here has flooded a number of times, a number of years, every winter and every spring, and so some of the younger cedar, that is stuff that's, I don't know, maybe 16 to 24 inches in diameter, that along the stream, it's getting root rot, and so those trees are dying. So you want a riparian area big enough that the forest, the natural forest, can regenerate itself and compensate itself for those sorts of events happening. And yeah, quarter of a mile, not even that in places, is just not enough. It's basically a corridor where the government and corporations can feel comfortable that they are doing something. Then they take the trees on both sides of the riparian area, both sides of the stream, and they clear cut. And this is terrible. And so these riparian areas have to be a minimum of 2 miles wide, and that's even not enough. But that's the type of stuff that we should be working towards, pressuring the governments and the corporations to widen these riparian areas along streams, and right-of-ways and bogs and lakes and so on. Make them very wide, and then you can actually start building a continuous forest, and you can start to see the biodiversity happening. There's actually enough space that that different kinds of species can start to place themselves and expand and flourish. It's still not enough. It has to be a lot wider, but a half a mile, growing it from half a mile to 2 miles, 3 miles. I mean, that would be a start, and it would be a good goal for environmental organizations, community groups, and so on to really engage with, to have those changes made. I don't know if you can hear the heavy equipment going, the big excavators and so on, but they're putting a road in just on the other side of the creek here, and it's a reminder that forest companies are always hungry for wood. We're really remote here, and they've now crossed the creek with a bridge, and they are going to take everything on the hillside, and they'll take it in various cut blocks. And it really is tragic, because at the end of the day, you know, different than say 20-30 years ago, is there's not really any benefit for communities to have all this clear-cut logging happening. It's highly mechanized. They go through the wood real quickly as they're doing it. They're building the road right now, but they'll be cutting as soon as the road is finished, and that'll happen really quickly. And all of the wild species will vacate this area, and it's just too disturbing for them. Nesting will be, pretty much stopped. Species will have to, go into a different area, and the problem is that these riparian areas, these old growth areas, there's not that many of them left. So it's a real problem. And then so they'll clear cut, and they'll, in a couple of years, those wild species will come back and start to find their way back into the area, just in time for the forest companies to return to do another cut. So it's a vicious cycle that leads to extinction. And there's not really any benefit. There's no more mills left in small towns anymore. There's very few people working in the forest industry locally. Most of them are in the larger centers. And the amount of damage that happens, and where's the benefit? The jobs really aren't there like they used to be. And if you could argue, well, we need the lumber and so on, but have you gone into a building supply store and bought lumber lately? There's no real benefit for even the consumer that's building a house. We're surrounded by timber, but yet our lumber prices are as high as any place else on earth. So it's very, very broken. The forest companies right now, whether they're private or publicly traded, I'm talking about the large ones, not the small companies, but the large forest companies, they're complaining that they're saying that it's not profitable for them and such. Well, this is the perfect time for the government to step in, big nonprofits to step in, municipalities and so on, to buy tenure, to buy the tree farm licenses that those companies have. The best thing that we could be doing right now is to buy them out, bid them farewell, give them the golden handshake. They will move someplace else on planet Earth, but to get those industrial properties back. Those industrial properties are crown land. That we have to remember that, and get them back, reduce our cutting substantially, create a shelter security plan so that Canadians have reasonably priced timber so that they can build reasonably priced homes. We can do that strategically, and there will be room for some companies to operate, but they will be connected to more of a domestic market, and that lumber will end up being high value for us because we'll see the difference that's out there in the landscape. Forests will just be naturally preserved, and when it's time to cut some timber, the provincial government could make cut blocks available in an auction, and but it's very strategic and very thoughtful. Anyway, that's a bit of a rant, and yeah, do I think this could happen? Yeah, it's inevitable that it will happen, but we'll probably end up going through a lot of pain first. But the more we get into the understanding that tenure is the biggest obstacle for us when it comes to protecting our forests. That's the key. Understand that, and you can build a strategy around it. Explain a little bit about the importance of understory, and I've got a log that's decomposing here, and if we can get I guess I got to go about there, and I'm gonna pull up. See how easy my hand can go down in here, and yeah, this is what keeps a rainforest, or any forest for that matter, alive. Look how thick that mulch is. There's a combination of moss and understory species coming up, like you can see the bracken fern, and there's a devil's club coming up over here, and so you can see all these little sticks. They're constantly being shed by the trees in this old growth area. You can see some lichen that's hit the ground, and cones. This is the perfect ecosystem that grows forests and retains the health of forests. And this is so important to protect and retain and to regenerate, because if we don't pay attention to this, then our forests won't thrive, and they won't turn into old growth areas. This is very different than what you would find in an industrial forest that's been logged and replanted, and where they haven't really cared about what's growing on the ground at all. They just kind of leave it alone, and the biodiversity is not there. So this is super important. This acts as a sponge. It's quite dry right now, but it's still moist enough that even through this dry period, it's protecting the trees and the roots and the whole ground cover of the forest. I'm going to go to a different spot and tell you a little bit more, but like I said, this is what you need. This is the mulch that grows the super soil needed to cause a tree seed to germinate. There aren't earthworms that are native to a forest like this. Earthworms drive the nutrition deeper down into the soil, and that's why gardeners and farmers like them, because they're creating a healthy, diverse topsoil that's quite deep for farming and so on. That's not exactly what trees need in a forest. What they need is all the super soil to stay in a very thin layer at the top that's got enough nutrients to germinate a seed, a tree seed. And then after that point, what's required is a constant feed of mulch and moisture, a blanket of moisture that sits on top all the time. So I'll just move the camera to a different spot, and we'll continue in a moment. So I'm going to show you what happens when I take this stick here, which is like many, many sticks that fall every day in a forest, coming from branches that have died, and maybe a wind has come along and snapped things, and maybe the tree is just naturally shedding dead branches. So this is a more mature understory, and it's got devil's club, it's got bracken, there's moss mixed at the bottom. It's very, very diverse, and it's a sign of a really healthy old growth forest. I'm going to take this stick and I'm going to toss it in here. Now, you see how that stick kind of disappears under the understory? That is, the understory is providing a canopy of green over top of that stick. What's happening here is that stick will forever be in shade and moisture because of that canopy, and it will decay and deteriorate and move closer and closer into the soil. It will be covered with moss, and it will disappear, and it will be part of this diverse recipe that happens in order to retain moisture for the trees and create this sponge. So I'm going to show you a different spot now. So I found a spot where there's just primarily moss growing. Difficult to find here because of the biodiversity in this forest, but I found along an old ridge of a log that there's nothing but moss. Here's my stick again, same stick. I'll toss it on top, and you can see what happens. This stick is just sitting on top. It's not going to be retaining the same amount of moisture because it doesn't have that canopy over top of it. So that's a bit of a lesson learned. So when these forests regenerate or if they're old growth and they've never really been damaged by man, they will evolve an understory. That is, if all the plants are available in that particular area, that will just consume the dead wood that falls on the ground. That dead wood feeds the entire structure of this moist blanket that's required. Each plant has a purpose. Each plant has a relationship with the trees and the other plants. And most of it is beyond our comprehension because we haven't done the research and the studies, and maybe we just haven't even come up with the questions that we need to ask to be able to explore it. But you don't have to take my word for it. You can do your own research and go out into the forest and just feel it for yourself. The industrial forest that's planted will end up forming moss, and much like the moss that I just showed you, where the stick didn't disappear into anything. So when you go into these industrial forests that have matured, there's dead branches everywhere. There's no understory. There's a lack of moisture that's happening. Yeah, thank goodness that there's moss because there is something there. But for the most part, the litter of dead branches is not really contributing to the forest the way the forest would want it to. So there's all kinds of issues there. The other issue is that when they go in and they clear cut an area, they disturb the biome. They disturb the soils. You end up getting it all turned up, and you end up getting a layer of clay and gravel and debris that takes years and years to regenerate. The other thing that you don't have, and you can see it behind me here, is this contour that ends up taking place. All of these little hills and ridges that represent, old creek channels and big trees that had once fallen and then decayed and created a hill. All of this contour ends up retaining moisture that ends up creating small micro bogs and wetlands that end up filtering water before it gets into the stream. When they clear cut an area, they level everything because they have to get equipment in and so on, and you do not have those contours. You have disturbed soil that doesn't have the proper vegetation growing back, and therefore you get extreme runoff happening into the waterways. So, you know, the teachings that we follow suggest that if you do the right thing at the water source, that energy then is replicated all the way downstream into the ocean. Sadly, that's not happening in British Columbia. We have too many areas that are ignored, industrialized, and depleted. Like I said, get out there, see for yourself. So here's the difference between bracken and ostrich fern. So this is bracken. Notice how it's laying fairly low to the ground. Spreads out. Now here is ostrich fern. Now we'll get one here that's a little bit on its own so you can see. Now if you can make that out, you'll see the ostrich ferns are standing more upright, clumped together, as opposed to laying flat like the bracken. Why is this important? Well, fiddleheads are ostrich fern. They're edible. So when the young shoots come out, those fiddleheads that you see in the store or that you're going to pick, you want it to be ostrich fern. Trouble is that when they're fiddleheads, they can be totally confused with bracken. Bracken fiddleheads will look exactly the same, and the young plants in the spring are very hard to tell apart. Ostrich fern, healthy, safe to eat. Bracken, studies in Japan have shown that it can lead to stomach cancer. So I notice a lot of people don't know the difference, and they're actually eating bracken fiddleheads, and I wouldn't be a bit surprised that some stores might be purchasing bracken fiddleheads, and the produce clerks might not know the difference. People selling them don't know the difference. So they're not intentionally doing that, I'm sure. But there's something that you should know if you are picking fiddleheads in the forest in the springtime.